I was going to say, this is like what they do in Vegas. The man needs no introduction. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us this morning on News Radio 1310,
Yep.
KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Who is that guy?
Yeah, Bill Colley with you as well. And I do want to point out if you've got a comment or question for the doctor this half hour, 208 736 0300. It is called Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine, a slogan being life's too short not to feel good. And you don't want to feel poorly when you're on vacation, which is a little bit of what we're talking about this morning.
Yeah, because vacation is way too short.
Yeah,
So you don't want to
I know
spend
that.
you don't want to spend your time being sick or recovering from something you could have avoided. So we're going to talk about travel medicine, and the title is "Know Before You Go," because a lot of us will, stay locally and kind of keep that all figured out, but others of us leave the country, and there's a lot of fun destinations that aren't too far away, whether it's Mexico or farther south or going over to Europe. There's lots of opportunity, and it's a lot of fun. I've been blessed to get to the point in my life where I don't have little kids, and we can go on serious vacations. And I've taken up the new hobby of scuba diving, and boy, that was a lot of fun. And so I'm going to tell you some experiences that we've had relatively recently in places that we've gone to. And it all starts with traveling on the airplane. And you get on the plane and you think everything's great until you become a germaphobe, and then you realize, holy cow, I'm surrounded by stuff that could get me sick here while I'm on my vacation. So I'm going to give you a couple of quick hints. This is true almost anywhere you go. I don't care if it's, you're traveling from here to Pocatello. The the travel illnesses are common because we get casual with what we're doing because we're just having a good time and kind of letting go. What the main, if I can give you one thing to do, wash your hands just before you eat because most of what we get sick with, we put in our own mouths, or nobody in the rest of the world picks their nose, but or we pick our nose and boom, there it is.
Now, you've got some families, of course, mom makes the sandwiches while you're on the trip, but most people, when they're on vacation, eat out a lot more. And you don't, and maybe that's another reason to be washing those hands is because you don't know what's around the restaurant.
Exactly. I'll give you the example. You sit down at the restaurant table. It's been wiped off, with a semi-clean rag that probably was used to wipe the last four tables, and swept onto the floor. And so you don't have grease, but you have plenty that's still left around there at the table. Or if you're on the airplane, your hands are exactly where everybody else's hands have been all day long in that airplane. Even if it gets wiped down, they're not going through it with great sanitizers, and you think, well, I'm only on the plane for a few hours. How bad can that be? And the answer is usually it's not very bad. But the moment that there is something that can, you contaminate with your hand and then put it either in your mouth, on your face, rub your eyes, something like that, now you've inoculated yourself with a new virus or a new bacteria that your body now has to fight off. And usually our body fights those off without us ever knowing we even had that illness. So for the most part, your body does just a great job. So this is not about being paranoid. This is really just taking some basic steps to say, how do I make sure my vacation is a good time? So washing your hands just before you eat anything is a great beginning. Um, we're going to talk a little bit more about what foods can be easily contaminated. But if you're especially out of the country, but really anywhere, if you will wash fruits and vegetables with a mild, diluted soap and water solution, you're going to get rid of most of the trouble that you could get from fresh foods. You can't really control the environment where you buy prepared foods, but you can, try to say, hey, is this reputable or not? I'm famous for loving the street vendors. I grew up with them in the Philadelphia area, and when I served a mission in Venezuela, we ate from street vendors pretty regularly. But there's a difference between the street vendor I saw, that just everything looked unkept, unclean, and
Yes,
so did
yeah.
they. And the street vendor that was, pretty well put together. Their cart was shiny. The packaging they used to hand you the food was all nice and clean and relatively dust free. So I'm not saying all street vendors are bad. I love taco trucks, so don't get me wrong there. But being a little bit picky, a little choosy is not a bad idea, especially when you might pay the price of being sick for several days and in bed and missing time. Um, so let me kind of go with the plane scenario. My wife, we go to Hawaii. We have all of about a week there, and she spent the entire time sick with upper respiratory and bronchitis, trying to recover from what we think she caught on the plane on the way there. So one little trick I learned, and this is not proven by studies, but I think has a real good track record for our family, and that is a little Vaseline, just about first knuckle up the nose before that plane ride catches a lot of stuff that you would otherwise breathe in and adhere to your nasal passages, because that's where most viruses are harbored for colds, is in the nose. So that's one. How to
We'll,
avoid upper respiratory and cough cold stuff.
we'll get back to that discussion in just a moment. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us until 9 o'clock this morning. We're at 42. It's 8:40. Bill Colley as well. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine on KLIX. Dr. Jonathan Tripp in studio with us from Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls. It's coming up on 8:43. We're at 43. Magic Valley this morning, and Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Remember, life's too short not to feel good. Bill Colley handling the telephones. And the doctor is also interested if you have perhaps a vacation horror story when it comes
There
to
you go. Yeah.
illness. Please feel free to share that. They always seem to happen at the most inopportune time. Anytime on vacation is inopportune.
Yeah.
There's an old play. It was made into a movie with Jackie Gleason and Ted Bessel called "Don't Drink the Water," and that's another one that comes up a lot. Montezuma's Revenge.
Montezuma's Revenge. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a famous. Anything south of our border, I guess, qualifies for Montezuma's Revenge. But that's just a fancy word for traveler's diarrhea. So let me talk about that. Who doesn't like a good discussion on poop? Story. It's my whole working life. Um, Traveler's diarrhea is just simply diarrhea you have while you're traveling. But outside of our country, then when you get that, is different than the diarrhea we would typically see if somebody got sick here. Most of the time, here in the U.S., we're going to talk about a viral cause of a diarrhea, which we're going to say we want to hydrate, make sure, if somebody's having nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, that we're finding ways to keep them hydrated, keep the nausea down so they can keep taking fluids in by mouth. And if not, we use IV fluids. But most of the time, we're not using antibiotics because it would actually make it worse. It'd irritate your stomach and your intestines worse. On the other hand, most of the time, about 80% of the time, when you get diarrhea outside of the country, it's actually a bacterial cause. And I learned this lesson 2 years ago, but then got retaught it this past week. I went down to Costa Rica for a lifelong friend's destination wedding, and they had about 60 plus people at this, kind of resort. Everybody was together, big happy family. But first, the groom got a little bit sick and let me know what was going on, and I was watching for others, and pretty quickly others started showing up with diarrhea, and so stories became shared. And the day of the actual wedding, we had people in bed. We had, um, people that were running back and forth to the bathroom all the time. And what's funny is the article that I reread relating to what to do to treat them talked about treatment is appropriate after the first distressing bowel movement. Whatever you want to call distressing, apparently it's pretty obvious, and it was to these people. So what was interesting is I couldn't even get a hold of medicines till we had about 6 hours to go till the actual wedding, which was an evening wedding on the beach. And we got mean people from the family that are sick and in bed, and so we got a hold of the medicines that I felt were appropriate, and everybody was able to attend the wedding, and most of them that were sick that day were dancing that night. So all together, the day of the wedding, I treated 10%, 6 people, and they were able to attend the wedding. So it's a quick recovery if you have the right medicine. So if you're going to travel, especially Central South America, come see us. Let's do a visit just on what you ought to have in preparation for your immunizations, medicines that we can prescribe here and you can take with you in case you run into, the traveler's diarrhea, what things to avoid, talking about mosquito illnesses. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about travel medicine. So the name Trip and travel should go easily together in your mind. So we'll talk about travel medicine. But come see us before you go. I will just give you a difference. The medicines that I used for these people probably would have cost here in the U.S. about $10, to have them treated. Maybe for all together, I might have spent 50. But getting that out of the country, we spent about $160 on the medicine. So it pays to have that figured out before you go.
Most of the time, people are going to places like Costa Rica, and if they're going to Cancun, they stay though in a fairly prescribed area where it's a little bit better. The food might be cleaner, and but on the other hand, a lot of people are going on, let's say, mission trips, and they go into
Sure.
parts of the world
Where
during the
they're
course of the summer.
they're at higher risk at that time. And the truth is, Costa Rica is considered one of the better places to go, the safer places. So I don't want to make it look like, oh, don't go there, you're going to get in trouble. No, it's just, when there's contamination of food, and we can get it here just as well, it's usually a bacterial contamination. There are other things like hepatitis that's foodborne that you can actually get an immunization for here in the U.S. And even if you have one, it's a series of 2 shots, one, the first one and then 6 months later. So even if you have the first one several weeks before you go, you'll have some immunity to that. And that would be a big deal because that's a real serious illness that can actually be avoided. So let me skip to a couple of immunizations.
We got a caller first.
Okay, go right ahead.
Caller looking to join us. It's 848, and you're on Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. Go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. Could you address hand sanitizers, alcohol-based or non-alcohol, please?
Love it. Okay, the alcohol-based hand sanitizers are effective, not as effective as soap and water. So the reality is they're convenient. If they're sitting at the front of a restaurant as you walk in, it's not a bad idea to use it. I personally don't like it because I get the taste of the alcohol later, when I'm eating. But in general, if you're in kind of a public location, you have a chance to use that unless you have terribly dry skin, which the alcohol is rough on. I would say they're a great thing to do to kind of clean up along the way. If you are saying which is actually better, the soap is better. It's still better. And the antibacterial soaps, our FDA finally came out and said about, I think it's later this year, they're no longer allowed to be manufactured. So you'll still see them on the shelf for a while, but they have found that they have developed some resistance throughout the population by having that antibacterial component in the soap. So
You're probably not likely going to be able to, by the way, if you're going out of the country, for instance, take your hand sanitizer on a flight.
you have to have anything you have has to be less than 3 ounces. So the hand sanitizer is considered a gel. So you could take that with you in a small container, and they are available. A lot of kids have them on backpacks and whatnot. So I've seen that, but so that is kind of a nice thing to carry with you. But if you're going to be around restaurants, you're going to have soap and water, and I think that's actually still a better choice. Let me talk to you about immunizations. It depends on where you're going, but if you look on the U.S. State Department website or the Centers for Disease Control, or just for travel advisory where you're going, you'll have various things. Typhus or typhoid fever is one that you can get a shot for that lasts you for about a year and a half, 2 years. But there's actually a short series of pills you can take if you do it several weeks before you go. That gives you 5 years of immunity. So they're better choices, especially if you ask and prepare ahead of time. In fact, our local health department, the South Central District Health, can provide you that information and those immunizations. So they're a great resource that way. Hepatitis A, I spoke about. There's other ones like yellow fever that can be completely avoided, but can be pretty devastating diseases if you're not aware. Malaria is one that is common in almost any tropical area.
This is where you get concerned about those people on mission trips, because they're often exposed to that malaria and dengue fever and a lot of these things that we don't hear about in this part of the world.
Exactly. And it's terrible stuff. I mean, it's really hard to recover from and pretty easy to avoid with treatment. And it depends on where you go, because there are places that we visit as U.S. citizens pretty regularly that have malaria, but it's a small enough threat that they don't even recommend treatment for it. But then there's others that you'd say, well, they're not too far apart destinations, and the recommendation is, oh yeah, you get treated before you go, while you're there, and after you come home. So, this statement of know before you go really is better. And now we have things like Zika virus that has really dropped out of the media, but is still present. So if you're pregnant, this is a tough one. Do you travel to the Caribbean and Central and South America? And the answer is, well, let's talk with your doc about really what's going on. Or are you planning on being pregnant in the next, 18 months? Those are things that Zika virus has an impact on. So by no means would I say don't travel. It's just be aware and be prepared, and your travel will be less eventful. You won't be slowed down. You won't be recovering during your trip, and you'll be able to enjoy it. So that's really, if you're prepared, you can have fun, and you're not spending time, being sick or recovering. So I guess my big message is, if you're going to go out of the country in particular, come see us. Let's make a plan. Let's figure out what you need to do, and we'll use the resources that are available to us locally. And if we need to go further than that, we can do that too.
Yeah, the dengue fever, I remember reading about that when you'd read about the old African explorers. And of course, a lot of people were going in there from Europe, and they didn't have any immunities. And they would come down with this, and it was just, sweeping through a lot of these. The explorers would go in there when they'd have their retinue, and they'd be going through the jungle. And within a matter of weeks, their retinue would be down to just a few people.
Yeah, no, it's life-threatening. And, the beginning of the Zika virus, if you have symptoms, isn't too different from dengue fever. So it does take some distinguishing and trying to figure out what's what. So those are, and we have people that go and come back and say, oh, what are you looking for? Well, you're looking for a fever. You're looking for a rash. And by the way, when I came back through customs in Houston, they had a big screen talking about pay attention to fever, pay attention to rash, because measles is on the rise. And, measles has, most people will go through measles and recover nicely, but it has some long-term effects, and in a rare case can actually cause death. So, what are you looking for? Well, it's a specific kind of rash, as is the Zika virus rash, but they both start the same, with a fever and a rash. So,
I had a brother-in-law who was on business in a country off the coast of Africa many years ago, and he got violently sick. He discovered, though, very quickly that there weren't a lot of great hospitals to treat him in that part of the world. Isn't that the other part of this, though? Is we don't really you trying to find somewhere that's reputable is not easy.
No, and again, Costa Rica, we got sick there, but you could get sick here. And Costa Rica actually has pretty good a hospital system, as do a fair number of the Central or South American countries. But you're at a farther distance. You have, a big question mark. Can you speak Spanish? Can you speak the language that's there? Do you understand what's going on? Can the doctor or the nurse speak English? So a lot of what ifs that you're trying to avoid. Then maybe you consider travel insurance, because if you need to be transported out, that gets really costly. And so I'd recommend somebody look at that before they go on one of these trips. But the answer on that is it's just preventative medicine. If you can prevent what could happen, let's do it. Why would you want to get to know their hospital system? That's not part of my vacation plans.
Right. Because as I say, there may be some in the larger cities, some very good hospitals, but trying to figure out, I don't know that there's a 5-star rating in your travel guide.
Right. Yeah, not a whole lot that way that I know of. In contrast, I have a patient who's in the Cancun area and had stroke-like symptoms, and was contacting me by cell phone saying, hey, what do we do? And I gave some recommendations of, this is what should happen, and yes, go to the hospital. And sure enough, they had great care. They got the same studies done, the same information, good advice from the local ER doc and neurologist. So they even had a specialist to help out. And so, And the beauty is they did it probably at about a tenth of the cost as if they did it here. So that was a nice sideline. But if you need help, go seeking help. Don't try to avoid it because you're afraid of who you might run into. Because there are very good doctors, in foreign countries, but obviously I'm staying in Twin Falls.
If a guy shakes a rattle over you, though, you might have a second thought
Yeah,
about
I'd move on to a second opinion.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's tell folks how they get to our office. We are on Fillmore Street, across from the post office on the north side of town. I had a patient show up yesterday that heard go across from the post office and went downtown, so they were a little late coming to the office. So it's on the north side, and so Fillmore Street, and our phone number is 208-933-4400, 208-933-4400. If you are looking for advice on how to get in better shape this spring and summer, how to maintain your new program of exercise without getting injured, come see us. If you're going to travel somewhere, let us talk to you about what to do, how to prepare for that. If you want to get involved in scuba diving, I have a good instructor we can talk to you about. But we have a lot of fun. We have great providers. We have a female provider, Lauren Bostrom, who is super smart and a sweetheart. Jeremy Daly has been with us for about 3+ years, and he has great experience in ER as well as in clinic. So you have a really good knowledge base of providers in our office, and we actually do try to get to know who you are. So it's a great place to be.
I was going to say, if you're going on vacation, even if you're only going to McCall for a week, you might want to actually look through a few things and ideas of what you might need to take along, because you never know. Even I was in Maine one time. I ate some seafood and I came down with a nasty illness.
Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Look at what you need, what you might need, and be prepared. You don't have to have the whole pharmacy with you, but it's good to know before you go. And if you want to know more about us, look at our website, trippfamilymedicine.com.
I want to thank Dr. Jonathan Tripp for dropping in this morning. Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. We're at 8:59. News is coming up next from Fox, and also Benita Baeza from the News Radio 1310 KLIX newsroom with a local update and one more hour of Magic Valley This Morning.